They brought the dead thing up the hill at sunrise, before the city was fully awake. When the rooftops of King's Landing were still a low, dull sea and the sound of the harbor was a muffled throb under a veil of mist. The wind smelled of damp ash and stale salt. Rubble shifted under boots. Grass had grown between the stones on the road, pale and thin, a stubborn, colorless life threading through the old injuries of the ground. Beyond it, the Dragonpit yawned like a broken bowl set on the crown of the hill, its walls black in places from old fire and new, its arches limned in the washed-out gold of morning. Birds nested in the ribs of the ruin. No one had dared to clean it. No one had dared to rebuild it. Jon rode with his gloves tucked into his belt and his hands bare on the reins so he could feel the air. It was a habit he had not shaken since the long watches on the wall, when the only way to know a storm was coming was the pinch of cold between finger bones and the strange, absolute hush that fell over the world in the moments before the wind changed. He watched his breath, thin in the cool, and listened to the hound curse the weight of the crate and the men heaving it along. The wood thumped against the remnants of a stair as they paused to adjust their grips. Ropes creaked. Somewhere behind them Davos cleared his throat and spat. The letter from Winterfell lay flat as a blade against his ribs, wrapped in oiled cloth and tucked beneath his jerkin. He had read it again in the chill before dawn, the ink now a little grayer than when it first reached Dragonstone, the strokes from Samwell's hand narrower and more certain than his old letters had been at Castle Black. It was a short letter. The truth fit easily on a single page, like the inside of a palm. Bran's words, Bran's new voice, everything pared down and precise. The way it seemed the boy had handed himself over to some kind of winter, had been set down beneath it, detached and unadorned. Rhaegar and Lyanna, a marriage in secret, a birth in a tower with wind moaning outside its arrow slits. Names put to what had always been a door without a handle in his life. The page had smelled faintly of Winterfell's smoke, and the beeswax Sansa favored now for the candles in her solar. It had changed the weight of him as surely as a new suit of mail. The hound paused on a landing and stood breathing through his teeth. He leaned one hand on the crate and the other on his knee, head tilted to one side as if listening to a voice inside his skull. "You lot don't know the meaning of careful," he said. "You drop it again and I'll put you in the box with it." He looked up at Jon with a grin that was only half there. "You look like you're already seeing ghosts." "I don't have to see them," Jon said. "We're bringing one." Sandor snorted and rebalanced his hands on the rope. He said, "because that's what sane men do. Fetch a bit of nightmare to show a queen who feeds her little birds to a rumor mill." Jon looked beyond him to the broken arch that led to the arena floor. Ahead, Tyrion paused beside one of the blackened pillars, squinting into the ruin. The sky was paling to a washed blue. Seagulls wheeled above the city's distant sprawl, their cries as thin as needles. The silence that lived in the pit was another thing altogether. It felt like the underside of a door. The hair on Jon's forearms prickled. He flexed his fingers as if he could shake it off. Daenerys had decided not to arrive before them. She would come on her own terms with her own spectacle. She had learned the uses of fear and wonder before she'd learned Westerosi words for half her hunger. He had tried to speak to her at daybreak. He had found Missandei brushing out her hair in the Queen's chamber, quiet and kind, but Daenerys had been facing the window, watching the thin line of light over the sea, her back straight, her robe girt like a soldier. When she turned, Jon had seen a night of thought in her eyes and the kind of tiredness that had nothing to do with sleep. He had started and then he had stopped. He had kept the letter folded. He had told her only that truth in the pit would be a blade with no hilt if they weren't the ones holding it. "Truth is armor," she had said, and it had been almost gentle. "And a target." He thought of that now as he watched the men pick their way over the shattered stone. He had never wanted crowns. He had never wanted a name that opened doors to rooms where men with rings on their fingers whispered about what would be best for the realm. He had wanted to look into a hall in Winterfell and see faces he knew and trust that when they raised a cup it was to keep one another warm. He had wanted the world to be manageable and immediate, a long cold night and a way to survive it. The letter had closed a question and opened a dozen more. It had made Daenerys's gaze turn searching when it fell upon him, as if she were looking past his face for something sharper. He had felt a small, private panic then, like a bird trapped behind a window. He had slept poorly and woken with his heart already in his throat. "Here they are," Tyrion said quietly as they reached the floor of the pit. His voice carried strangely in the space, slightly off, like a lute string tuned just a breath too high. The sideshow followed by the main act. Across the arena, Cersei descended, attended and armored in a black so pure it seemed to drink the light. She moved carefully, not slowly, a woman accustomed to the treachery of steps. Jaime was a step behind her, still broad-shouldered, still handsome, but thinner at the mouth now. Euron Greyjoy came with the swagger of a jester who had stolen a king's crown and then ruined it with a dent, laughing with his men as if the ruin had been the point. Qyburn, thin and pale in a sober robe, blinked the way a man blinks when he is thinking of something else. Bronn, who always looked ready to leave the moment a job stopped being amusing, patted his sword hilt and studied the shadows, as if considering the price of shade in such warmth. Brienne stood near the base of a ribbed arch, her broad, honest face turned up to the splintered vault. Podrick was behind her, trying to find a way to stand that made him look both alert and inoffensive. The City Watch kept themselves as quiet as they could. Ravens watched from the slit of a broken window high above, as if winter had sent its eyes to check the numbers and names of this gathering. Jon's breath went steadier as they formed into the shape of parley. He found his place near Tyrion and Davos, the box behind them like an ugly altar. He did not look at Daenerys' chair because it was not there yet. When she came, the wind came with her. No one on the floor had quite settled into the grammar of their stances when the shadow passed over them and broke, and the thump of two great bodies reshaped the air and made every instinct from the dawn of men wake in the spines of the onlookers. The Unsullied did not flinch. Grey Worm's gaze rode the dragon's sweep and returned to the queen the way a compass needle returns to north. The Dothraki, those who had come, grinned like boys who had found a new game with risk enough to make it satisfying. The queen dismounted with a grace that might have been a lesson or a boast and took her seat with no hurry, the dragon's breath steaming in the chill where it met the day. Cersei did not blink. Jon watched her, the muscles in her face almost perfectly still, only the smallest tightening at the corner of one eye betraying that she had not quite anticipated how small dragons made men feel when they were near enough to scratch their scales. Daenerys looked across the pit and met Cersei's gaze and smiled in a way that contained no warmth. Then she searched until she found Jon's eyes, and in that moment her mouth softened. But what moved inside her gaze was calculation as much as anything else. He lifted his chin. There were 1,000 ways to speak the truth, and most of them were wrong. Tyrion did what he did best, which was dress necessity in civility and present it as if he had invented it. His voice carried. He spoke of the threat that came walking, of the corpses that would not lie down. He spoke as a man who had drunk deeply of doubt and now had chosen his side against the dark, even if the choosing had cost him something he did not name. The words marched out and made their case, and then the hound dragged the box forward, shoulders bunched. He shot Jon a look that said many things, among them that he would prefer to kick the pit stones into Cersei's face and be done with it. They opened the box. The white came on like a thrown thing, bursting out as if the lid had been a sky. It hit the end of the chain with the jerk of something bone-deep wrong and scrambled for purchase with nails that were more knife than keratin. Its breath was the breath of a cellar. It had no voice and still it screamed. Cersei took a step back. Euron laughed, too loud and too bright. Qyburn's eyes lit like a hermit's at the sight of a pilgrim's coin. Jaime had a hand on the hilt of a sword he did not draw. Jon stepped forward into the black stone light of the pit and met the thing where it flailed. He cut at the wrist as he had done on the wall, because even when the dead were new to him, he had already learned that hands could be very dangerous instruments. The hand came free in a gout of gray, and the fingers crawled toward Cersei's shoes with insect purpose. Qyburn stepped between them and the queen, the only time in his life perhaps he had moved faster than any soldier, and crouched as if to watch a beetle. His face became a boy's for an instant. The hound burned the hand and then the white's body, and the fire turned the stink into a different kind of stink. Jon watched Cersei watching the flames like a woman remembering wildfire. At the edge of the ruin, Brienne swallowed and looked like she wanted to place her body between the queen who wore the lion and the fire. They made their offers and counteroffers. Words were used as wedges, as blankets, as cloaks. The queen in black would not promise help unless the king in furs and scars promised to take no side in the matter that had been the song of every tavern fire for 300 years. The queen in silver did not flinch. The men between them tried to make a bridge of the air and felt it break under every line. Jon had thought the moment would come like the sudden crest of a wave, loud and certain. Instead, it arrived like a door he realized he had been opening finger by finger while trying to pretend his hand was still on his sword. He heard Ned's voice the way he sometimes heard it in the wind at the top of the wall. Not words exactly, but a set of bones to hang words upon. Say what is true. Say it even if it cuts. He thought of Daenerys' eyes. He thought of the winter past the neck moving like a man with long legs. He stepped forward and the voices around him changed pitch, as if a string had been tightened. He did not glance back to see Missandei's face, or Davos's or Yora's. The letter at his ribs felt cold as iron. "I cannot promise neutrality," he said. He did not raise his voice. The ruin did the work of carrying it. "I cannot promise not to take sides because there is no time left for that kind of oath. There is one battle and it belongs to all of us, but I will not win it by wearing a falsehood like a shield. I was raised the son of Eddard Stark. He taught me to stand in the snow and bear the wind as it came, not to crouch behind another man's wall and call the shelter courage. I told your envoys my knee is bent to the queen." He looked to Daenerys and in the same motion felt the floor shift beneath his life. "But I have another truth to place before you, and if we are to live long enough to see spring, you all must hear it and weigh it as you please." Cersei's mouth tilted in amusement, then froze as if a draft had slipped down her back. Tyrion closed his eyes in a way that meant he had anticipated the turning but had not known where the blade would fall. Davos's breath went out and did not come back for a long moment. Daenerys sat straighter, the tendons in her throat tightening. "My name," Jon said, and the air moved around the word as if it had weight, "is Aegon Targaryen." The birds above made a noise like cloth tearing. The pit felt smaller. The faces in it grew more distinct. He could see pores and scars and the shine of oil on armor. It felt like the moment a man takes a plunge into a frozen lake and the cold closes around him so completely that the world becomes a single sharp shape. He drew the letter from his jerkin, and that small motion, the unwrapping of the oiled cloth and the lift of the page, seemed obscene in its plainness. "Rhaegar Targaryen married Lyanna Stark," he said. "In secrecy, yes. In vows as binding as any under gods or law. Their child was born in Dorne. He lived." He did not say "I lived" because he was not speaking about himself to these people, not yet. He was placing a stone on the board and waiting to see who would lean in to look and who would kick the table over. Cersei's eyes flicked to Tyrion, then to Qyburn, then to Jaime. Her voice was soft, a fairy story tucked inside a bastard's mouth. "Ask your maesters if they keep records," Davos said before Jon could answer, the rasp of his years in his tone. "Ask them what a prince values more than a song." "Ask Winterfell," Jon said, and he surprised himself by smiling. It was a small smile with no humor. "Ask my brother. He sees as far as ravens fly and farther. Ask Samwell Tarly. Ask your gold cloaks to fly south and pry up every stone in the place where a prince's vows were changed. I would rather this truth remained a private matter for another day. I would rather have said it to my allies first. But Cersei Lannister has asked for a pledge from a name I do not carry, and I will not grant it by lying with a false one. I am a Stark by how I was made and by what I love." He could feel his throat tightening and he forced each word through it. "But I am a Targaryen by birth. And if a crown is the price of drawing the living into one hall, I do not want it. Let Daenerys Targaryen keep her strength. Let me keep my word. There is no room left for a quarrel over chairs." The last sentence hung in the air like frost. Missandei's mouth opened as if to speak and then closed again. Yora had taken a step forward that he arrested with an effort so visible it hurt to witness. Varys did not move at all. Tyrion's face was eloquent in its silence. He was watching Daenerys, not Jon, not Cersei. Daenerys spoke, and her voice was carefully measured. "He speaks truth as he believes it," she said, and the care shone as brightly as the warning. "This is not the hour for genealogies and old men's annals. The dead." Cersei laughed once, thin as a blade. "How convenient," she said. "How very convenient that a northern boy, raised off the leavings of my father's war, climbs onto a dragon and discovers he has been a dragon all along. Tell me, your grace." She looked at Daenerys and did not quite sneer. "How does it feel to pave your road with cities and ash only to arrive and find there's a man already at the end of it claiming he was born to stand there? For a heartbeat, the ruin felt like a shell in which the whisper of a sea grew." Jon turned toward Daenerys because there was no other direction for his body to go. Her face was not the face she wore to frighten lords. It was the face she had been born with laid bare. A flicker of something like hurt, something like fear, and then the flame of anger caught and steadied. Careful, he thought. He had no words to give her that would not echo. She was already answering a dozen of her own. "Whether his claim is smoke or steel," Jaime said, and he sounded suddenly older than Jon had ever heard him. "The dead do not care. They are not making lists." Cersei did not look at her brother. "They will make lists when they are finished eating," she said. "They will tally bones. I think I will make my own list first." Euron spoke then, loud and coarse, promising to sail to the end of the world and leave all this nonsense to the fools who nodded at dragons as if they were not merely beasts with fire trapped in them. He joked about nephews. He slapped a shoulder and made a show of swagger. It was a diversion, and it worked. It carried attention away from the moment like a street magician waving with his left hand while palming a coin with the right. When he was done, he had bought them enough air to finish the fragile shape of the day. Cersei's terms did not soften. Jon would not bend to them. Daenerys would not trade dignity for the promise of a lion's mercy. Tyrion asked for the space to try to make a new thing in a room of old stones. He went where he had nearly died once and came back pale and unsmiling and, like a man who has gambled with the last coin in his purse, boasting nothing. Cersei offered help and did not mean it. They all knew it and accepted the lie because there was nothing else on the table but the breath coming white out of their mouths. When they were outside again, the day had warmed enough to make the sweat run down between armor and linen. Jon did not remember the descent. He remembered the letter biting him through cloth, the way Daenerys' hair looked when the sun caught the ends and made them burn like the edge of a page, the slight stagger in Tyrion's step when he came out from among the Lannisters and saw the sky again. Davos said something to him and he answered without hearing himself. They gathered in the lee of a broken wall and men moved around them like a tide. The dragons settled where the ruins offered them shadows and staring space. Jon stood across from Daenerys and kept his hands loose at his sides. He could feel every eye that belonged to their people and none of the ones that belonged to the city on his back. "You should have told me," she said. She did not raise her voice. The intimate tone made the words heavier. "I tried," he said, "this morning, before I rode into a den of lions with you at my side," she said. "Before I was accused of being a fool in front of a woman who will burn her children if a map says there might be victory on the other side of the pyre. Before..." She stopped and shut her mouth on a breath. Missandei stood a yard behind her with the kind of stillness that had nothing to do with fear. Yora was near enough to reach the queen in 2 strides and far enough to give them privacy. Tyrion found a place on a fallen column and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Varys moved as if the ground were a board and he was arranging his pieces with care. "I would have told you," Jon said. "I meant to, and then I realized that if I told you alone, it would be the kind of truth that turns into a rumor the moment it leaves our lips. I will not wear it like that. I will not put it in your hands and then ask you to carry it for me." She asked for an oath from a name that is not mine. He felt his voice go hoarse and did not change it. "I could not answer as if I were a man I'm not." Something moved across her face. Annoyance, grief, pride. all in quick succession, like light sliding over water with waves crossing from different winds. "And what name do you answer to now?" she said. "John," he said. He could feel his heart beat once hard in his chest. "It is the one that got me here. You put a knife in my back without drawing it," she said softly. "Do you understand that?" "I do," he said. He did not try to look away. "I am sorry for the hurt and not for the truth." She smiled with her lips closed. "You would be Ned Stark's son to the end." "Not his son," he said, and the word tasted like iron and snow. She flinched, as if he had reached out and touched a bruise on her. Tyrion slid off the stone and came to stand at their side with the awkwardness of a man who knows he is intruding on a thing that already includes him. "We cannot afford fractures," he said. "Not small ones, not hairline ones. Our enemies have a way of turning cracks into doors. Your truth, John, is a door. It opens onto halls with 1,000 unpleasant rooms. I will not go through them," John said. "You might not have to," Tyrion said, and there was something almost like pity under the dryness. "Others will. The Dothraki will argue over what the gods mean when they put two heads on one shadow. The Unsullied will ask whether their discipline can be broken by a crown dangling in front of another. The North," he spread his hands, "the North has its own superstitions. They already have a king. He has a different name today than yesterday. The letters are sharp in different places. How they cut depends on who picks them up." Daenerys looked past them to the dragons, and Jon watched her hands relax. "I will not yield my claim," she said. The decision steadied her posture. "I broke chains to get here. I walked through fire. I crossed a sea for a kingdom that was stolen from my family. I will not hand it to a boy who discovered at breakfast that it was his all along." Jon felt something like relief at the clarity, and then something like grief behind it, and then he found a quiet place under both where he could stand. "I'm not asking you to," he said. She looked back sharply, puzzled for an instant, and then skeptical. "You already have." "No," he said. "I have asked everyone here to put down their old stories and come north because dead men are walking. That is the only throne left. It's made of wind and night and teeth. I have no taste for another." "Then why tell them you have a better name?" Yora said. He had edged closer without seeming to, and now he let his voice enter like a second blade where one had already been set. "Why polish it until even our enemies can see their faces in it? Because Cersei asked for a kind of lie I'm not fit to give," Jon said. "Because if I began this winter by saying what's convenient instead of what's true, I would never be able to find my way back to anything else. Because if I said yes to her, I would be half yes forever." He looked down at the letter, at Sam's hand, at Bran's steady, strange marks where he had signed his name with a cold that had nothing to do with ink. "Because I cannot be what I'm not." Daenerys held his gaze until the muscle in his jaw stopped jumping. Then she turned to Missandei. "Fetch the captains," she said. "We will sail with the tide. We will send riders north ahead of us. Grey Worm, see that the Unsullied have what they need to move as soon as the ships are ready." Missandei bowed and went. Grey Worm gave a quick nod and was already turning to speak with the men who shadowed him. Jon watched the work begin, orders traveling through ranks like small, precise sparks, arguments in low voices, the shaping of motion out of air. "With your leave," Tyrion said to Daenerys, "I should speak with our northern friends, explain the mathematics of rumors. The sooner the better." Daenerys's mouth lifted, not quite in approval. "You always did like numbers," she said. "Do the sums carefully." She looked from Tyrion to Jon and then away. It was a dismissal as tender as she could make it. Tyrion and Jon walked together along the outer rim of the ruin for a stretch. A group of boys watched from the mouth of an alley, and their eyes brightened when the smaller man nodded to them as if they were princes. "Do you know," Tyrion said, "there was a time when the only thing anyone wanted of me was a joke? I was a performing creature. Now I am asked for futures as if they were coins in a pouch, and sometimes I almost wish for the simplicity of being expected to balance cups on my nose." "I would not have asked you to," Jon said. "No," Tyrion said. You would have asked me to carry a secret. You spared me. They reached a place where the wall had broken under its own weight and fallen outward, creating a slope of stone and dust that slid toward the city. The air smelled faintly of the sea. The sound of hammers at the docks reached them like a memory of a song. Tyrion picked up a pebble and rolled it between his fingers. I assume this revelation is true, because the gods are too fond of stories for it not to be. He glanced at Jon. Do you intend to repeat the announcement north of the neck? Jon stared out over the city. Smoke folded and unfolded on the rooftops. It will not stay here, he said. Nothing does. No, Tyrion said. You have accomplished something rare, my friend. You have made every man in that pit see a different map on the same piece of parchment. The north will smell Lannister plots. The Reach, what little of it breathes, will smell a way to matter again. The Ironborn will smell a wind to tack into. And Cersei will smell blood. He let the pebble drop and dusted his fingers. I would counsel you to do nothing for 3 days but talk quietly to Daenerys Targaryen until your tongues forget how to say anything but gentleness. Jon felt a laugh rise in him and decided not to let it have the air. It would have sounded like something breaking. I'll go to her tonight, he said. Go to her now, Tyrion said, and for once his humor left his face bare. The hours are wells, and some are very deep. They returned the way they had come, but the space had changed as if the ruin itself had listened and now could not unhear. Jon found Davos near the edge of the pit, watching a knot of men loading gear onto a cart. The old smuggler was holding 2 pieces of rope and tying them together with the kind of attention that meant he did not want to pay attention to other things. Can you believe it? Davos said without looking up. That I, who never learned my letters straight, have lived long enough to see ink throw the world under a different set of wheels. I'm sorry, Jon said. Davos snorted. You're always sorry, he said. And then he looked up and the half-smile he gave Jon had the shape of forgiveness. Better a hard truth that lets me sleep than a soft lie that wakes me screaming. We'll weather this. We've weathered worse, you and I. Jon clasped his shoulder and felt the solidity of him. Keep the men ready. I'll keep them ready, Davos said. You keep your queen. Jon went to find Daenerys and met Jorah instead. The knight had set himself where the path narrowed, a gate made of a man who had stood in many doorways and chosen carefully when to step aside. He was not in armor, not fully, but he looked as if he could lift a house with one hand and hold it while a woman walked out from beneath it with her head high. She asks for time, Jorah said. I will wait, Jon said. You will do more than wait, Jorah said, and there was no heat in it, only a statement of what he had decided to guard. You will consider the weight of what you've done and measure it against every kindness she has shown you and every risk she has taken on your word. And then you will apologize for the manner of it until she believes you mean it. I do mean it, Jon said. Jorah nodded once. Good, he said and stepped aside. Daenerys stood at the edge of the broken wall, looking out at the city the way a woman looks at a hearth before she will put her hands into the ashes. He approached and stopped at a distance that felt right. She did not turn. The dragons were not visible from here, but he could feel them like weather. The small hairs on the back of his neck lifted once in a breath. I am not your enemy, he said. I know, she said. It would be easier if you were. He did not speak again until she did. The sun had moved perceptibly by the time she did. It had warmed them both and made sweat trickle at Jon's spine. The city had breathed and coughed and groaned. When I was a child, Daenerys said, my brother told me stories every night. He told me that our names were the last room in a house that had been burned to the ground. He taught me to hate doors that would not open for us. When we walked through a market and men did not step aside, he held my hand so tightly that my fingers ached and told me to remember the feel of it, that someday they would kneel or die. When I learned that he was a liar in small things and a monster in large ones, I kept one thing from him because it felt true when everything else did not. That names have power, and mine would someday buy me a home. She turned then, slowly. You have taken something from me today, not the crown. That was never yours to give. You took certainty. You took the small, private comfort of being the only one with a key to this house we're building. And you did it for a reason I cannot hate you for. I did it for winter, Jon said. And for you, though it does not feel like that to you now. She searched his face and then moved closer by the smallest degree. If you were the sort of man to use this to unseat me, I would have seen it in you by now, she said. You haven't the taste for it. That almost makes it worse. I can't undo it, he said. No, she said. You can't. But you can decide what to do next. You will walk by my side and you will not flinch when men bow to you or curse you for it. You will keep telling the truth and you will make it clear that the truth does not want my throne. And you will help me wage a war against a thing that does not understand words. We will do this work together or we will die in a confusion of names that no one will remember. She tilted her head. Can you do that, Aegon? He almost said don't, but he did not. I can, he said. Good, she said. She stepped past him then, and as she did her sleeve brushed his hand and the contact was like touching a lit candle for an instant. The shock of heat and the urge to pull away, and the refusal. We sail with the tide. The words went down into the ruin and came back changed, echoing with resolve. The rest of the day peeled away like bark from a post. Men moved. Ships took on casks and barrels. The hound found a place to sit with his back against a warm stone and fell asleep with his mouth open for a quarter hour and then woke snarling when a gull landed too close to his boot. Brienne and Jaime stood close and apart, civil as two soldiers sharing a road, and if their hands ached for want of one another's grasp, neither showed it. Tyrion carried a map rolled like a baton and hit it softly against his palm when he thought. Varys ate nothing and spoke little and looked as if he had swallowed some small creature that was still alive and learning his insides. By evening the city had returned to its routine of noise and, above it, the ruin settled back into the shape it had been in for years, broken and empty, a place where boys dared one another to run across the floor and where couples came to kiss and tell each other half-true things because nothing whispered back. On the quay, Jon stood looking at the ships as torches kindled. Davos came to stand beside him without being asked. They watched longshoremen play private games with knots and talk in the dialect of men who have learned to read water. How long until she kills you for doing the right thing at the wrong time? Davos said. I have no plan for dying, Jon said. Good, Davos said. It never works. The lanterns made paths of light along the water. Beyond them the sea was a black animal shifting its back. Jon thought of ghosts walking in it because ghosts walked everywhere now. Every shadow held a memory of a man he had lost. Every wind smelled a little like cold iron. He thought of Bran up in Winterfell with his eyes glazed like a lake under ice, and Sam in some library chamber with his hair sticking up and his face earnest and smudged. He thought of Sansa pacing, Arya still as a cat before a leap. He thought of Ned's voice again and how whatever part of him that was made of that voice had survived more deaths than a cat. There was a shiver in the air, a kind of tremor that meant someone had spread a map or a plan like a sail and the wind had found it. He turned and saw Daenerys walking toward him with Missandei one step to her left, Grey Worm farther behind. Tyrion trailed, talking to himself in that way he had, as if arguing with an invisible man who sometimes won. We'll take the Queen's ship, Daenerys said. It's the fastest. Tyrion says fewer masts make better promises. It also makes us a better target, Tyrion said. But if I begin to list the ways we might die between here and White Harbor, your breakfast tomorrow will be a bowl of weevils. I've eaten worse, Jon said, and Davos grunted his agreement. They moved together down the quay. The smell of tar was thick. Ropes lay like sleeping snakes. Jon kept half a pace at Daenerys' shoulder because that felt right now, neither behind nor ahead. Men stopped what they were doing to watch them pass. Some nodded. One or two touched the knives at their belts out of old habit. A boy with a face still round from childhood stared at Jon with eyes like a field mouse and made a fast sign over his chest. Jon did not know the prayer. The boy looked relieved anyway. On the gangplank, the wood bounced. The ship felt alive under his feet in a way castles did not. He had loved the wall for its certainty, for its stillness, for the way it told the wind what to do. Ships were the opposite. They asked the wind, and the wind sometimes lied, and men called it a voyage. Night raised itself out of the sea as they cast off. The city fell away, its lights a scatter of fireflies. The ruin on the hill disappeared into the clump of darkness that was land. The dragons came late and settled like moving hills along the afterdeck, their breaths rhythmic as bellows in a smith's chest. The crew pretended not to shiver. Missandei spoke with the captain in a low voice and then returned to Daenerys' side with the efficient steps of a woman who had learned to make each move count because once in her life every step had been watched. Grey Worm stood near the rail and stared out into the nothing as if he could will a path to appear. Jon found a place at the fore to stand where the spray hit his face in a steady, unspectacular rhythm. He liked that. It asked nothing of him. The sea smelled cleaner by night. The stars came out one by one, shy as children who have been taught not to draw attention. He put both hands on the rail and bent his head and let the sound of the water speak into the space behind his eyes. He did not hear Daenerys approach, but he felt the change at his shoulder. She had a cloak around her and her hair was braided tight against the wind. Without asking, she took the space next to him as if it had been promised. For a little while they said nothing. "You're quiet," she said eventually. "I haven't got used to the sound of my own name," he said. She made a small sound, not quite a laugh. "I haven't either," she said. "It was easier when you were Jon Snow and not a riddle." "I am still Jon," he said. She looked up at the sky as if searching for an answer there. "That may be the only reason we're not at war," she said. He thought of all the wars that did not require banners. "If it is, I'll keep being him," he said. The ship climbed and dipped. The wood hummed. There was a comfort in motion. He almost ached with it. He wanted the north under his feet, the bite of the air, the hard silhouettes of leafless trees standing like men who had planted themselves against the wind and decided to grow that way. He wanted to put his hands on the stones of Winterfell and feel the old, solid patience of them. He wanted to walk down into the crypt and speak aloud to a statue and not feel like a fool. "Tell me about him," Daenerys said suddenly. "Who?" "Ned," she said. "The man you thought your father was." He closed his eyes. For an instant he was small and the world had the smell of leather and steel oil and the dogs in the yard and a winter apple cut with a dull knife. He found his way back without effort and the telling was not difficult. "He was stern in a way that didn't hurt," he said. "He had rooms in him that were always shut." He laughed softly. He did not sing, but he listened to song as if it mattered. "He rode with me when the snow was deepest and taught me to keep my hands moving even when they felt dead, because that's when you stop feeling them for good. He believed that when the time came to cut, you did it yourself. He thought men wasted their courage gambling on the wrong things. When he held my shoulder, he put his fingers just there. He touched the spot. And I never understood why until I was older and a sword's weight had taught me which bones matter most. So you would be the kind of man who says what he cannot unsay," Daenerys said quietly. "Yes," he said. "And I," she said, "would be the sort of woman who does not forgive easily being surprised in a room full of enemies." There was no sting in it tonight. It was another truth placed between them and accepted for its shape. He looked at her and the wind made her braid shift like a rope. The dragons shifted, too. A scrape of scale on deck, a sigh. The night tasted of salt. The cold stung the tip of his nose. "Cersei will use this," he said. "She will try," Daenerys said. "She thinks she knows how to bend truth the way she bends men. But the dead will cut off her hands if she reaches too far, and I intend to be there to watch when they do." "You sound certain," he said. "I have to choose a certainty," she said. "If I allow myself to stand on a deck that keeps moving under me, I will be sick with it." He nodded. The stars had multiplied. The horizon was a seam. A bell rang twice aft and he turned. The captain shouted something about a change in wind. Missandei moved as if suddenly taller. Grey Worm stepped to the stairs with the natural command of a man who had been remade by order. Tyrion appeared with a cup and then thought better of it and put it away, as if the sea might steal the wine from him out of spite. In his chest the old, quiet vow stirred. He had made it alone in the cold, the kind that makes a sound when it touches skin. He said it again now, under his breath, part prayer and part promise and part apology for all the things he had let loose that could not be put back. I am the sword in the darkness, he thought. I am the watcher on the walls. The words fit him as they always had. They did not argue with his birth. They did not care for crowns. They told him that no matter what names men smeared on his life, he belonged to the night and to the small, stubborn light he could carry into it. At the same hour, hundreds of leagues away, Bran Stark sat in a chair by a window and watched 1,000 tiny lives blow over the snow. His eyes were open and full of weather. Sam sat across from him, bent over a piece of parchment, small and human and infinitely patient. When Bran's gaze returned to the room, it did so slowly, as if his body and mind had to negotiate every step of the way back. Sam blinked up and smiled with 2/3 of his face because 1/3 had a quill under it. "They've left," Bran said. His voice was hollowed out by distances. "They're on the water." Sam wiped the nib and set the quill down. "Good," he said. "Good. They'll be here soon." Bran looked at the hearth as if it had betrayed him once. "Cersei heard it," he said. "She heard his name." Sam's hand went to the page as if to steady it. "Then we'll be ready," he said. "We'll be ready to say it again, properly, with witnesses and warm rooms and people who love him close enough to hold him upright if he needs it." Bran blinked slowly. "He will not fall down," he said. "No," Sam said. He pushed his glasses up his nose and smiled again with all his face this time. "But I will be close anyway." Outside, the wind changed. It moved around Winterfell like a dog circling the place where it means to sleep. In the yards, men hammered and sharpened and cursed and laughed. On the battlements, boys peered north and tried to look like men. In the Godswood, the weirwood tree stood with its face as calm and bright as blood on snow. Arya moved under its branches sometime in the night like an unmarked thought. Sansa walked the walls and watched her breath. She thought of letters and ravens and the way one truth could knock down a room and another could build it again. Slower than anyone wanted, but stronger than the first. The ship cut on. The night drew itself up and curled around the mast. Jon dozed standing and woke without a start, the way men do who have taught their bodies to sleep like wolves. When the sun came, it came gray and grudging. They ate bread that had gone stale and cheese as hard as a heel and salted meat that asked for water. The sea had a long, regular swell that made men who had never sailed concentrate on the horizon, as if they could steady it by will. Tyrion tried a joke before noon and judged the deck too sober to take it. He turned the joke into a maxim about alliances and then into a small lecture on how words travel faster than ships, and by the time he was done, he was nearly funny. Daenerys did not avoid Jon, and Jon did not chase her. They found one another in the movements of the day like two threads in a tight weave. When he spoke to the captains, she listened. When she spoke to the Dothraki, he stood near and let her voice lay claims on the air, and if the riders looked upon him with new, measuring expressions, he bore it. Near dusk, Varys came to stand beside Jon at the stern and watched the wake stitch itself into nothing. He did not speak for a while, and when he did, his tone was conversational, as if discussing the price of fish. "Your honesty has done us a favor," he said. "It has cleared the field of certain surprises." "And sown others," Jon said. "But we knew those seeds were there," Varys said. "I would have preferred to plant them one by one in soil of our choosing. You threw them to the wind. We shall see where they take root." He tilted his head. "For what it's worth, I believe you. Not because I know your heart. Men's hearts are their own secret places. But because what you said was too inconvenient to be a lie." Jon looked at him. The spider's face was unreadable and, for that reason, honest. "And what will you do with what you believe?" Jon said. "I will do as I always have," Varys said. "I will count. I will listen. I will keep children from being made into numbers when the counting grows harsh." He paused. "I am pleased that you do not want her throne." Jon had no answer for that which did not sound like a boast. He said nothing. Varys inclined his head, a courtly gesture made almost comical by the wind tugging at his sleeves, and drifted away. Night again, stars again, the feel of distance collecting like cold inside bones. Jon lay on a pallet in the Queen's ship and stared at the ribs of the hull and thought of towers. He had dreamed of a woman who smelled of winter roses. He had dreamed of a man whose face he did not know standing at the foot of a bed with a sword in his hand, crying and smiling at once. He woke with the taste of iron in his throat and sat up and listened to the ship breathing, men breathing, dragons breathing. He stood because he could not stay down, and he put on a cloak and climbed to the deck. Daenerys was already there, a darker shape against the dark. She did not turn when he approached, but he knew she knew. He stood 3 paces from her and watched the seam of the horizon find itself again. "We are almost family," she said, and the words were plain. The way a stone is plain when the water has worn it until its shape is the only story it has left. He swallowed. The night seemed to press cool cloth to his eyes. "Yes," he said. "We will make the new words for it later," she said, and there was a ghost of a smile, a softer thing than she had worn all day. "For now we will be what we have always been. I will be stubborn and hungry. You will be honorable to the point of idiocy. Between us, perhaps, the world will not fall into a hole." He found that some weight he had not named had shifted. "Perhaps," he said. She looked at him, and in her gaze there was an ember of something that had not gone out because of the truth, only changed color. "Go to sleep," she said. "Tomorrow we plan how to place your impossible name in a place where it will do the least harm." He bowed his head. She laughed softly. "Don't do that," she said. "It makes me wonder if I should curtsy." He left her at the rail and lay down again and slept a better sleep. In it, he walked a long corridor under Winterfell with torches going out behind him. At the end, there was a door. It did not have a handle. He put his hand to it and it opened anyway. By the time the masts of White Harbor showed themselves to be more than cloud, the rumor had overtaken them, riding the coast like a bright horse. Men on the docks called to one another and used names with the eagerness of boys trying out new swears. The harbor master's face was composed and proper, and his eyes were pleased to be the first to see everything. He bowed exactly as low to Daenerys as he had decided to bow, and then he bowed the same to Jon, and in that insistence there was a measure of the struggle to come. Davos muttered something about prices and pay and men who had made the sea their ledger. Tyrion asked him what he liked to drink in White Harbor, and Davos said, "Beer that tastes like bread." Missandei tried not to smile and failed. On the quay, a woman with a baby on her hip stared at Jon with open curiosity and then at Daenerys with a guarded awe, and Jon understood in that instant how their story had already begun to shape itself without their hands on it. He reached for that quiet vow again and found it where he had left it, intact. They would go to Winterfell. They would put down their banners and raise them again in different formations. They would walk into rooms where names had the weight of hammers, and they would try to set them down without breaking the table. They would plan a war for which plans were jokes and courage was both coin and prayer. They would stand side by side on battlements and say each other's names only when they needed to, because every time they said them the world tilted a little. Behind them, far to the south, in a red room with a view of a city she called her own, Cersei Lannister drank wine with a stillness that was not sobriety and put small stones on a cloth. Each stone was a man or a woman. She placed a lion by a weirwood leaf and smiled, and then moved it away and smiled again. Qyburn stood by the window and watched a bird he had trained circle and return. "He has a Targaryen name," Cersei said conversationally, as if discussing the meat that had come to table. "Yes," Qyburn said. "Does he have a taste for crowns?" she asked. "Not yet," Qyburn said. "Then we will teach him to have one," she said. "Or we will teach the North to fear those who do." Jaime stood in the doorway, and his hand flexed where a hand had once been. He had the look of a man who had never expected to be asked to choose between truth and family, and had now done so often that the words no longer came with edges. "There's snow in the Riverlands," he said. "I know," Cersei said. She kept placing stones. "I can smell it." The harbor swallowed the Queen's ship and let it out again into a river made between packed vessels and men's arms. Jon looked up the river of masts to where the land began to own itself again and thought, Winterfell. He felt the letter at his ribs as if it had been stitched into him. He would tell Sansa slowly. He would tell Arya with words she could cut without bleeding. He would put the paper in Bran's hand and watch Bran not look at it. He would speak the name and speak it again, and then he would put it where it belonged, back under his ribs where it could warm or burn as it pleased. And he would go out on the wall and look north and count the fires that meant men were still men and the cold had not taken them yet. The ship bumped the quay with a gentle, final nudge. Ropes were thrown and caught. Daenerys stepped forward and the city watched. Jon came to stand beside her. The dragon in the air above them traced a slow, ragged circle, a living sigil stamped onto the day. The crowd murmured. The wind smelled of fish and pine and the first rumor of snow. The world tilted a fraction and then steadied. "Shall we?" Daenerys said. "We shall," Jon said, because that was a word that gave both of them something to carry. They crossed to land together. The plank bowed and held. The name whispered through the crowd like a chord struck softly, and the chords around it, a dirge and a march and a prayer, wove themselves into a music that would be hard to silence. He put his boots down one after another and looked up the road toward the heart of the north, toward the walls he knew as if they had been cut from the bone of his memory. He placed his hand upon that quiet vow a last time before the work began. "I am the shield that guards the realms of men," he thought, and then he went to do what he had to do. Winter grumbled awake beyond the docks and sent small messengers ahead of it. The sharp smell of pine sap from cartloads of split wood, the stiffened fingers of boys coiling ropes, the old men's coughs that came deeper and cold. The harbor's lip foamed where sea pushed into river, and the ships lay with their sails furled like sleeping wings, masts ticking in the breeze. A gull landed with a bold hop on a coil of hawser and peered at Jon with one amber eye as if judging the price of him. When the dragon shadow skated across the quay, the gull flew without scolding. A white scrap of fear tossed into the sky. Faces crowded the head of the pier, fisherwives with shawls tight, men with salt in the cuts of their knuckles, children with ears red as apples. Some looked at Daenerys as if she were a story come ashore and might vanish if they blinked. Some looked at Jon as if he had come home with a crown no one had ordered and set it on the table where soup should go. Between these and those were all the other sorts of looking, the careful, the merely curious, the suddenly calculating. In the gaps were soldiers from both her host and his, standing in the brittle stillness of men who will not begin a quarrel and are not sure they can finish one. The harbor master made his bows and gave his greetings and secured the lists that would feed men and keep books even if snow took the Guildhall's door off its hinges. He said the usual things in the neat accent of the Manderley city, and then he said the unusual thing and did it with a courtier's plain face. "All White Harbor welcomes you, your graces," he said. He had made the choice to say it to two people in front of a crowd, and everyone heard the arithmetic. "Your grace will do," Daenerys said, pleasant as a sharp knife put away. "We bring our own grain for the march inland. We will pay for what else we take. We'll pay thrice," Davos added, and smiled as if bargaining had already made him happy. "Twice," the harbor master said, and his own smile was a sensible man's. "We like future business better than one day's profit. The roads will want salt. The smiths will want iron. We'll want our children past the winter. That makes us friends." Tyrion made a note in a ledger he had produced from a sleeve as if by magic. "Friends are more economical than conquests," he murmured. "It's amazing how men forget that." They left the ship under a sky that seemed undecided and found the road that climbed away from water. The dragons rose from the afterdeck in a shake of sound that turned heads and hardened jaws. One of the beasts banked low enough that Jon felt the press of its passage on his shoulders, and the smell of it filled him for a moment. Hot iron and a deep animal musk, the way a forge might smell if it were alive and dreaming. Men spilled about them carrying out a plan that had been sketched at sea and now took on weight. Wagons with canvas covers waited. Saddle girths were checked. Gendry, sleeves rolled, stood by a cart of dragonglass blanks in greasy straw and argued cheerfully about the design of a pick with a smith who had 3 teeth and a lifetime's habit of winning arguments by outlasting them. Grey Worm moved through squads with a soft authority that lifted spines. Missandei gave directions that turned rumor into order without bruising anyone's dignity along the way. Varys spoke to no one and somehow learned everything. John looked up the road and imagined it as a line drawn to Winterfell through that pale, undecided sky. Distance organized itself in his head. An inn where a man once offered him a bowl of stew that had only one piece of meat in it, and both of them smiled about that. A crossroads where he had stood looking in two directions so long that the wind had given him the answer he already had. A copse where he had sat a horse and let it graze while he counted the ways a man could enter those trees and not come out again. He would ride them now with dragons overhead and an army like a moving town around him, and it felt somehow obscenely loud. They moved. On the first day, the land welcomed them back with leanness. Fields lay stripped to stubble, squares of honest hunger patched together into a quilt. Crows sat on posts and looked like punctuation marks on a page no one enjoyed reading. Men in patched cloaks watched from hedges and did up the buttons of their uncertainty when dragons flickered by. The Dothraki called to one another in their high, fierce music and laughed at snow the way boys laugh at a dare. The Unsullied put their feet down like numbers in a column. Northerners hunting the verge of the road raised hands and received nods that meant, "I see your winter, and here is mine." Fisher smoke from villages clung in the low places. There were new fences across old tracks where wolves had come closer than men liked. When the sun went low, it went quickly, as if tired of the work. They camped by a stand of leafless birches. The trunks were white enough to glow. Men made fire with the practiced hurry of people who do not flatter the weather by assuming it will be kind. The smell of stew found its way through the drafty lanes of tents the way the smell of hope finds its way into hard talk. Tyrion set up a trestle in his own shelter and spread maps with stones for corners and called it his study. Yora said little and looked like granite with a history. Davos counted, muttering each number as if it were a prayer to keep the next one arriving. Jon slept on a pallet that complained faintly every time he turned. He woke twice with the sense that he had been traveling far without moving, and both times, the second more sharply than the first. He was certain the cold on his face had not been only air but some presence like air, a notice taken of him across great distance and not dispelled by fire. In the morning his breath feathered and turned to shreds and then nothing. He rubbed his hands together and watched his men pack frost with their boots. On the second day, they met a man from a village that had never thought it would matter to anyone what it was called. He stood in the verge with both hands out like he meant to hold the road and stammered that his people had seen the last of a band of men with black cloaks flee a watchtower with blue light behind them that looked like nothing lit by any honest fire. His eyes were the eyes of a horse that has bolted and then stopped and cannot remember how to be still. Jon's heart gave one heavy knock. He sent riders with him and said to Grey Worm in the same breath, "Double the pickets," and to Davos, "Send word north as quick as tongues can carry it," and to Daenerys, "We keep moving, we keep moving," she agreed. She had not slept much either. It made her eyes brighter. It gave the lines beside her mouth something steelier. But no man goes ahead out of sight of the dragons. "You do not need to spend them on this," Yora said calmly. "Their fire will be wanted when winter shows more than its teeth." "I'll spend my strength where lives are in the ledger," she said, and it was not unkindness, only arithmetic. By the third day, the North's shape had risen inside the men who had not known it, and those who had knew it again. The road began to remember feet. The ditches had their familiar trash. A broken comb, a bone no dog had bothered to gnaw, a length of rope with a knot that had outlived use. On a ridge, a circle of stones made a place to talk with the dead if a man wanted and had the nerve to stand there listening to his own voice come back with less breath in it. Jon rode past and inclined his head without looking long. There was too much of the dead in the living air already. On the fourth evening, as gray bled into darker gray and the cooks shouted to one another like men on a shore throwing lines, a boy in a foxskin cap raced a pony into camp and pulled up in a spray of frost and hoarse breath. He looked everywhere at once and nowhere at all, then fixed on the first face that held his look steady. "Davos." "From Winterfell," the boy said, and held out a leather case with a string about it. He tried to make his mouth stop trying to be a man's mouth and failed admirably. Davos cut the string with a knife that had more stories than some castles and passed the folded packet to Jon without drama. He held his breath while Jon read. Sansa's hand was steady. The words were few, like the last pieces of bread at the bottom of a bag. Rationed, necessary. She wrote that the stores were adequate if the counts were honest, and she was making them honest. She wrote that the forges had begun the work that would turn black glass into edges and points. She wrote that Bran had looked north and then farther north and said nothing anyone wanted to hear. She wrote that some lords had sent grain and some had sent excuses. She wrote that Arya had taken 2 men with her and come back with 3 less mouths to feed and a sack of buttons no one asked about. She wrote that ravens had brought rumors from 6 directions, and in each rumor a different name for him, and that the men in the courtyard tried them in their mouths when they thought no one was listening. She wrote 2 last things. Come quickly, come with care. He folded the paper once and once again and put it under his jerkin where the other letter lay, and for a moment they vibrated against his ribs like plucked strings making 2 clear, conflicting notes. He nodded to the boy, who ducked his head with a brave jerk and looked like he might fall down with pride. Eat, Davos told him, and sit by a fire and let the heat talk sense into your knees. On the 5th day the wind swung cleanly into the north and stayed. The men leaned into it as if into argument. The dragons rode it and seemed pleased. The Dothraki shouted the names of the trees as if trying to tame them with language. Missandei learned 3 words at once for the same snow and used them all properly by evening. Varys put a hand to his bald head as if to make sure it did not simply fly off. They saw Winterfell at Un on the 6th day. The light was poor, and even so the walls had their old patient color, the no color of stone that intends to outlast speech. The gods would made a blackness within the white around it, as if the heart of the world was a held breath. The smoke from the kitchen chimneys rose in straight lines, then frayed in the new wind, and smells of onion and fat drifted down the road like welcome. Closer, the place arranged itself into meanings in Jon's bones. He saw where he had run as a child because the stones were a little lower there. He saw the corner where Arya had bloodied a boy's nose and had to be dragged away grinning. He saw the well he had leaned against to steady his breath when the news from the south had been too large for his chest. He knew the sound the hinges made on a certain door and could hear it now even though he was still half a field away. At the gate, banners waved the air. The dire wolf of Stark. The flayed man of Bolton gone away to wherever flayed men go when memory is tired of them. The bear of Mormont. The tall pine of Cerwyn. A ragged handful of lesser arms hung like prayers on a cord. Men stood under them with faces set the way men set their faces when they are determined to behave well in front of strangers. Sansa came down the steps into the yard with the kind of grace that had nothing at all to do with courts. She wore a cloak that found the wind and made it her color. Arya was 2 paces to her right, an absence of fuss that drew the eye more than any adornment. Bran was in his chair near the base of the steps, a stillness inside of which lived a sky so wide it made Jon's skin crawl when he looked too close. For a breath the yard made a sound without any of the usual noise. No creak, no clank, no boot scuff. Then life remembered itself. Jon dismounted and the dragon above them reminded everyone to look up. Men did. Some flinched and some smiled, the smile of men who would rather be afraid of real things than of the ones they invent to fill long nights. He went to Sansa and took her hands, and the strength in them steadied him to a degree that made him understand some part of the time before he had left that he had not understood then. She kissed his cheek with the formality that hides relief. When he turned to Arya, she gave him a look that doubled as embrace, insult, and inventory. He hugged her anyway. She was small under his arm and sharp. When he pulled back, she was smiling in a way that made him suddenly 12 and just as suddenly older than he would ever want to be. Daenerys came forward and did not bow or curtsy, and it was not rudeness. It was the dignity of one sovereign meeting another in a place that was neither's. Sansa inclined her head enough to acknowledge that she had understood this without enjoying it. They exchanged the kind of courtesies that are really a sorting of tools. Here is my blade, and here is yours, how sharp. Winterfell noticed the dragons with debate and then with a strange, grudging acceptance, as if the place had decided to act as the body sometimes does when given a new pain that will not go away. It tests it from all angles, flares an objection, and then finds a way to move with it. The beasts settled on the far side of the godswood and steamed where the frost met their heat. The dogs in the yard could not agree on whether to bark or crouch. A stable boy vomited twice discreetly behind a pile of hay and then returned to his broom because duty, like nausea, has a rhythm. They met in the great hall and winter had taken the space in hand. The rushes had been changed and smelled cleanly of cut reed and wild water. Fires burned in the hearths with a seriousness that had nothing to do with coziness. Men crowded the benches, and some tried not to glance up at the gallery as if ladies' faces were banners, and some did not bother to pretend at all. Jon stood at the head table and did not look down at the black table surface where scratches made a map of nothing in particular. Daenerys at his left made the dais feel like a ship's deck, steady underfoot and treacherous if a man forgot the sea. Sansa sat beyond him and wore a chain of little iron wolves at her throat that had been shaped with rough love by a Winterfell smith and not by any southern fineness. It suited her. Bran's chair had a place. Arya found a shadow and leaned against it with her arms folded and the expression of someone who has decided to quarrel if asked and not otherwise. The lords did the work a hall does to itself when it must choose how to breathe. Lord Glover, with his mouth already prepared to be aggrieved, did not bother to be patient. "We named a king," he said, as if everyone had been asleep when it happened and he was only now waking them. "We named him in this hall. We named him with our voices and the sound of our hands and the pounding of our feet. He was ours." "I am," Jon said. He did not raise his voice. "In all the ways that matter, I am." "You bend your knee to a dragon," Glover said. He gestured, not at Daenerys but at the idea of her, and his face knew it was engaging more than one enemy. "Southern crowns, old stories, cold fear. Do you ask us to bend ours in the same wind? We'll be broken." "We ask you to live," Daenerys said. The hall shifted, surprised that she had taken it upon herself to answer where some expected Jon to carry the whole of it. "We ask you to consider that allegiance can be made for a season and still be binding. The dead do not count treaties. Let us count them after." Lynna Mormont stood. She was so small the bench seemed to shrug her up into the air. "No one asks the Mormonts to bend," she said. "We give our service or we keep it, and if we give it, we do the work instead of writing oaths about it." Her glance struck Jon and Daenerys like two thrown coins. Quick, bright, exact. "We named you king in the north," she told Jon. "We'll not unname you because a southern piece of parchment says your father did something interesting before you were born." A scuff of laughter, a murmur of satisfaction, a pinch of discomfort. Tyrion wrote something down and did not look up. Jorah looked at the girl and looked away, and for a moment his face forgot to be guarded. Sansa lifted her hand and the murmur thinned. "The North will not be ruled from anywhere but the North," she said. "We have learned the price of forgetting that. Jon has not asked us to trade Winterfell for a chair of knives. He has asked us to stand in a storm together and not pretend it is rain." Bran's voice came then, a bowl struck by a spoon. It was even and empty of ornament. "He told the truth to Cersei Lannister," he said. "He told it in a place where lies are born. He told it to keep himself from being made into another one. It will not help us to pretend it can be untold." Sam rose from a lower bench, pushing his spectacles up his nose with a forefinger that had ink on it still. Many eyes brightened when they noticed him because they had not expected such a simple-looking man to suddenly stand with a piece of the world in his hand. He held nothing. He cleared his throat. "Your ladyship," he said to Sansa. "My lords, your grace, I am Samwell Tarly. I was at the Citadel and then I left because they were not planning to help us with any more than books, and I have learned that books are not always sufficient. I read something there. I saw it with my own eyes. A record. Names. It is a dull thing to speak about in a hall, but sometimes the dull things hold up the interesting ones." Daenerys watched him as if the flame behind her ribs had changed color. Jon watched her watching. Missandei had her lips pressed together as if to keep her counsel inside until it was wanted. "Rhaegar Targaryen married Lyanna Stark," Sam said. "The High Septon annulled an earlier marriage first and then performed the ceremony. The child born of that marriage lived. The child is Jon." He looked around as if trying to apologize for how awkward it was to say such a consequential sentence in a room that had not agreed to it. Aegon, he added, in case someone had not yet heard the second name and needed the hurt of it now. A breath went around like a low wind. It touched some faces and not others. The men who had thought themselves ready for this truth discovered that readiness is a sort of lie the mind tells itself on kind days. Glover sat back, as if something had been thrown at him and he had not moved quite quickly enough. Lyanna Mormont's jaw went stubborn, as if the truth had offended her out of principle. Wyman Manderley, who had arrived with the last group from the river road that morning with a face the color of fish flesh, rubbed his belly with slow contentment. His eyes were sharp and caught small motions as well as any cat's. "Names do not swing swords," Sansa said, saving the hall from its own silence. "Winter does. Men do. Dragons, perhaps. If Jon has a name that matters in King's Landing, he may do something with it later. For now, he has the name we gave him and the work that comes with it." "You would put aside the stronger claim?" someone said. Not one of the great lords, but a petty man with a good face who had the new habit of asking bigger questions than his father had ever dared. Fear makes such habits bloom. "This is not the hour for catalogue and precedence," Tyrion said mildly from the lower end of the table, without standing. His voice reached them all anyway because he had learned how to do that trick since childhood. "I would counsel you to stack your firewood now and argue about the height of your chairs in spring." "You would," Glover muttered. "Yes," Tyrion said. "I would counsel anyone to do anything that keeps them alive long enough to bicker with their neighbors. I have a gift for the sort of advice men hate and later call wisdom." Daenerys stood before the hall could decide to fracture into little circles. "I do not wish to unmake the North," she said, and the force of her attention once turned made the air between her and the furthest bench feel shorter. "I wish to make an end to the thing that would unmake us all. If your king's blood has another name in it, I am not threatened by that. I have crossed a world to reach the truth of things. The truth is that the dead are nearer than comfort allows. You will not swear me fealty today. I will not ask it. I will ask for your spears and your iron and your trust enough to let my dragons crouch in your gods' wood without arrows in their eyes." The last sentence made the smallest ripple through the benches. Laughter in a climax, relief in a long breath, stubborn men acknowledging a cleverness they would not have thought to say. Sansa inclined her head, the least that courtesy allowed, the most she would grant at a first meeting. "The dragons will be left unmolested," she said. "The smiths will be shown the dragon glass. The forges work day and night. We'll not quibble over shifts. We'll feed your men, and you will not empty our stores without telling me first." "I'll tally," Davos said, cheerful in the way he had learned to be when walking along the edge of a roof in a gale. "I've fingers. I've lost some. The rest I count with." A draft moved through the hall like an omen. Men shivered and told themselves it was the door. A boy dropped a spoon and it clattered and made a sound that felt like a sign. Bran looked up into a space no one else could see. That night Winterfell did what it had always done when strangers came and stayed. It measured them by the sound of their feet along the corridors and the way their voices changed when they spoke under the beams of the hall versus under the sky of the yard. The kitchens learned the appetites of Dothraki and figured out a stew they would eat without complaints that cut into kitchen pride. The forges found the way dragonglass wanted to split and not split and shaped their blows around that desire. The kennel master kept the dogs from fighting with new smells and old voices. The gods would listen and did not change. Snow began in the middle of the night with the delicate certainty of a promise made without asking permission. Jon walked alone under the covered way behind the North Tower and practiced the shape of a conversation he did not want to have. Sam found him there because Sam had a gift for knowing where conversations a man did not want lurked. He had a candle and a blanket and the expression of a friend who will not call himself that out loud because the word might make a man feel cornered. He did not need to say anything. Jon leaned on the wall and pulled the cold into his lungs and let it go. "She didn't send you," Jon said. "No," Sam said. "But if I were her, I might have. I'm a coward in ways that make me good at certain jobs." "You're not a coward," Jon said automatically. and then smiled because such old habits were a relief even when they were false enough to be jokes. "You're Sam." "Yes," Sam said. "That's the worst of me and the best." Jon's hands made fists against the stone and opened again, the way men do when they are choosing how not to strike anything. "I have turned her allies into judges," he said. "I have turned the North into a room full of men who want to take me aside and tell me the proper use of my blood. I have made your truth a weapon and placed it on the table where anyone can grab it." "You took it away from Cersei," Sam said gently. "If your throat is to be cut by a truth, better it be by a friend's clumsiness than an enemy's care." Jon laughed once without mirth. "You think I was clumsy? I know you were," Sam said. "I've known you long enough to hear the sound of you tripping over the right thing to do." Jon let his head touch the cold wood and stayed there for a full minute. "I can bear being thought a fool," he said. "I have practice. I don't know how to be the thing my name says I am without breaking the other thing I am. And if I must break, which piece will fight better?" Sam adjusted the blanket around his own shoulders. "You're the sword in the darkness," he said. "Swords don't care what name the hand that holds them learned at a cradle. They care if the grip is sure. You hold." Jon held his breath and then let it out. "She said the same thing in different words," he said, "about what she cares for." "Then perhaps this will work," Sam said simply, and in the saying was a faith that did not need to be spoken larger. Daenerys did not sleep long. She had asked for a small chamber with a window the wind could find, and it did, and it worried the flame in her lamp like a dog. Missandei sat near the hearth and mended a seam with small, exact motions. Jorah stood where he could see the door and the window and the way to the stair in one turning of his head. The shadows made a map of their loyalty on the walls. "It will cost me," Daenerys said at last, when the lamp went low enough that truth felt less naked for it. "This generosity." "Everything costs you," Jorah said. "The trick is to pay some of it late." Missandei knotted her thread and bit it off with white teeth. "A map with 2 dragons on it," she said, and smiled a little at her own use of a Westerosi figure. "It is a thing men will stand around and argue about. In the arguing, no one is marching." "I won't be outflanked by patience," Daenerys said, "but I will be seen to be patient. Tyrion will explain to them how clever that is." "He'll explain it to himself first," Jorah said. "Good," she said. "Let him have the comfort he can find." The next day brought work that felt like progress. Dragonglass took edges and the smith's talk turned from curses to pride. Gendry showed Arya a spearhead shaped from black glass that drank the light and returned it in a narrow spill of sharpness that pleased her. They stood under an eave out of the snow and he told her in quick, awkward phrases that he had been a king's bastard and a rower and a smith and a runner of messages and a boy who thought the world wanted his laugh when really it wanted his legs. She said nothing and then said, "You're still all those things." And he smoothed a hand over the spearhead as if to hide a smile in its reflection. Grey Worm took his men through drills in a corner of the yard that had been a place for archers once. Northern soldiers watched them with a mixture of suspicion and admiration and copied a few movements later when they thought no one was watching them. The Dothraki rode out onto the field south of the walls and raced one another through snow that tore up under their horses' hooves in white fans. A boy fell and was up again and laughing before the horse had finished slowing. Missandei learned the names of those boys. She would remember them if she needed to. Tyrion and Sansa walked the covered gallery from the great keep to the great hall and spoke without looking at each other. It was easier to say certain things when a face could not betray the muscles behind it. "I told you I was good at surviving," Tyrion said matter of fact, as if the years between had been a single long night in a house he knew. "I had help from women wiser than me. One of them was you." "I poisoned a few men's sleep," Sansa said. There was no bravado and no apology in it. "We count that service," Tyrion said. "The realm ought to. Let the realm learn to count other things first," she said. "Food, houses that stand against wind. How many secrets will not kill us if we say them aloud? And how many will?" Tyrion said. He paused by a slit window and looked out through snow that had troubled itself into lace. You know what her followers are thinking. They are thinking that a woman's work has been stolen by a man's name, Sansa said coolly. Some will trust that she can hold what she has made. Some because they know her, some because they are wise, some because they have no other choice. Some will turn their eyes to my brother like crows to a bright thing. They will pull at him with their mouths and call it destiny. He will not like it. He will endure it. He will endure anything if he thinks it gets us through winter. If he lives, he will hate what they have made of him. If he dies, they will make him into a song. Tyrion's breath ghosted in the cold light. And you? What will you make of him? She looked out past the snow to where the godswood showed its black heart. I will make a hall that does not fall when men sing, she said. I will make a thing that lasts. If the dead permit, Tyrion said, and their smiles for one another were thin and honest and did not require friendship to be true. Toward evening the weather thickened and the smell of iron got into it. Men working on the walls found their fingers clumsy and cursed cheerfully because it meant they could still feel anything to curse with. In the stews of Wintertown, meat that had been saved for the coming of lords went into pots because gossip cooked as well over fat as over water. In one alley someone shouted in Dothraki, and in answer a boy threw a bone, and then an insult that had a word in it Northerners do not like to hear about their mothers. Words met words, and then someone's elbow met someone's face. And then a knife came out, and suddenly there was a shape in the street that looked too much like the beginning of a story that ends with burned houses. The Hound was there, as he often was in places where bad luck found men with too much time and not enough sense. He shouldered through the knot of bodies with an authority born of size and of a reputation for not being impressed by small violences. Enough, he said, and plucked the knife out of a hand by simply taking the wrist and twisting until the fingers cried for peace. A Dothraki youth with snow in his hair and joy in his anger made to leap in. Dee found Grey Worm's calm gaze on him like a door suddenly shut in his path. Missandei's voice filled the space between men with sense. Stop, she said in Westerosi that came soft and came sure. No more. She said it in Dothraki too and in the language of Noth, and in all of them it sounded like the voice that reminds a child that there is a tomorrow. Jon arrived with 2 guards and that quiet that comes off certain men when they are angry and have chosen not to be foolish with it. Sansa came on his left with a cloak that dragged little tongues of snow along the ground and a look that would have shamed soldiers if it could be given to them one by one like a cup. Daenerys came with Yora, and the sight of all 3 in one small northern street turned whispers into silence the way a hand cups a candle. Whose blood? Jon said, and when no one answered, he went to the man on the ground whose arm had been cut, bound it with his own scarf, and helped him sit as if he were a boy. You have family? A sister, the man said, breath shaking more from cold than from fear. 2 boys. One is simple. You'll go home, Jon said. You'll be looked after. He nodded to a guard he trusted and the man moved, and there was relief in the air the way smoke has a smell. Daenerys spoke to the Dothraki youth in his own tongue. Her voice had a fierceness in it that made him stand straighter and lose some of his pride in being seen. She turned to the Northerners and said, with the dignity that comes from choosing who you are in public, my people are under my law. Your people are under your ladies. No one's law says we bleed one another when the dead are coming. If you want blood, wait a little while. There will be enough to swim in. Someone snorted laughter that broke too many tensions at once, and the street became again what it had been before. A place where men step careful because ice is treacherous, and women talk on doorsteps with blankets about their shoulders, and boys throw bones to dogs. They walked back to the keep together and did not talk about the name in Jon's chest, because that name had begun to talk in other mouths and there was a kind of relief in not needing to lend it breath. That night a raven thumped at the window of Maester Wolkin's chamber until his candle shivered and wax went in a line onto a book the old man hated to see spoiled. He cursed under his breath and took the bird's leg in his hand as if it were a wrist. The seal was broken by teeth, as if the sender's hands had not been able to spare themselves that work. He read, and the color took itself out of his face and laid it on the table between his fingers. In the hall, the words took their places like cold men at a table. Eastwatch had fallen. The sea did not stop fire blue as wrong. The dead had crossed into the living's geography with a step that men could not sketch on any map. Jon read it and looked at Daenerys and saw in her what he felt in himself. An end to all the small arguments they had been using to keep themselves from the edges of the big one. The room around them went quieter than silence. A log in the hearth cracked and threw sparks like the last of a charge falling to the ground. "We ride," he said. "We fly," she said. They did both. At dawn the dragons went up like black and bronze punctuation slashing a gray sentence. The road filled itself with men again, but with a new rhythm, the rhythm of urgency that has burned away ceremony. The smiths, cursing and proud, loaded what they had finished and took their tools for work done at the end of days. The lords counted men and found that counting now did not come with pride attached, only the grim animal comfort of knowing how many bodies a wall could hold. Sansa stood on the steps and did what women of Winterfell have done always. She made sure the work of leaving did not unmake the place. She had a list for everything. She drew food out of corners that had forgotten they were corners. She spoke to old women who had not forgotten hunger since a different winter and learned how to be generous and stingy in the same sentence. She told Arya to go where Arya thought best and meant it. Arya went to the Godswood and looked at the face in the tree, and it looked back, and neither had anything to say to the other that did not sound like a knife being sharpened. She found Bran and the wind moved around him as if he were a post planted in a flood. He looked at her and then looked past her and then said, "To the air, he sees us again." And she did not ask who he meant because part of her did not want to know and another part of her already did. In a tower room with a window that watched hunger collect in the sky, Tyrion and Varys played at not playing Syvas. The board sat between them with pieces in their starting places like men on a wall still standing. Tyrion had a cup he did not drink from. Varys had hands folded. "Cersei will not come," Tyrion said to the window, as if this might make it less true. "She will send something else," Varys said. "Letters, gold, a man with a pleasant voice, a woman with a tragic story. She will send whatever stories she thinks will stick better than the ones men already want to tell. She will slow the wheel by clogging it with rumor," Tyrion said. And for once there was no humor in borrowing Daenerys's old metaphor. "Do you think she can reach this far? Stories don't have to travel the whole road," Varys said. "They only have to be seen from a hill and imagined the rest of the way." "She will say the North chose a dragon," Tyrion said. "And then she will call them hypocrites for changing horses midstream, and then she will call them fools for keeping the first horse out of loyalty when the second swims better. She is good at arguing on both sides and winning." And then, Varys said, "The dead will arrive in the middle of her sentence. I would like to be there to watch her decide how to finish it." They did not touch the board. It was a small courtesy to the world to leave the pieces standing for another hour. On the third day out on the road north of Winterfell, as frost drew a tight skin over everything and men's breath made a permanent rumor in the air, Jon rode beside Daenerys and heard in the wind that old strange feeling again, as if some force with no hands had set one against his chest and another at his back and tested the distance between them. He thought of the wall with blue fire in it and felt in his bones that some ancient negotiation had ended. He told her without looking at her because words are easier if the eye is not required to prove them. "He knows us." She did not ask who. Her mouth drew a narrow line and whitened. "Let him," she said. "Let him see two shapes. Let him be confused by our names." "He is not confused," Jon said. "No," she said. "But he has never fought a woman who has crossed the world to meet him. He has never fought a man who has died once and refused to stay at peace. We will make him learn." He believed her because belief felt like a weapon he could carry without taking his hands off his reins. At dusk, as they sought a fold in the land to cradle camp from wind, a band of riders came along the ridge with torches like the points of a crown. For an instant the light made them seem larger than men, and then their horses stumbled in the same small ways any horse will. Tormund came first, beard full of ice, eyes full of laughter for living another day. Beric Dondarrion's face looked like the kind of road map men do not want to have to use. They had few with them, and all of them were gaunt with the sort of surviving that has no lessons a man would willingly learn. Tormund's grin was a weapon. "You've brought a king and a queen," he said, and peered up at the dragon circling like a cold moon. "And 2 of the biggest chickens I've ever seen. Good. The dead are hungry." Jon shook his arm, which was like shaking something that had been part of the land until recently. "East Watch. Gone," Tormund said. "The wall, it sang when it fell. I'll hear that song when I'm an old man, and if I die tomorrow, I'll still be one." He looked past Jon to Daenerys with open interest. "You're the dragon woman." "I am," she said. "You burn easy," he said, as if it were a question. "Ask the Lannisters," she said. He barked laughter. "I'll ask them after it matters." Beric slid down and stood with the stiff carefulness of a man who has been put back together by a craftsman who has had to make do with bent nails. "He looks for cracks," he said, his good eye on Jon. "He'll send the dead where he smells coral. He isn't clever. He is what clever looks like when it's made of ice. Don't give him a path." Jon thought of the hall, the harbor, the street, the yard with its complicated drills, the small conversations that knit men into armies or unmade them. He thought of the name under his ribs and the one that hung out in front of his face like a bright thing men might be drawn to for the wrong reasons. He thought of Daenerys' hand brushing his coat one night by accident and the heat of it shocking him into a steadier breath. He thought of the dead like a tide. He said to Beric and to himself and to the wind that liked carrying vows, "I won't." That night the camp lay like a constellation that had been spilled on the ground. Men slept, or made the attempt, and dreams rubbed against the edges of their bodies and left marks. The dragons lay with their heads on their paws and watched the moving of men with the patience of old gods. Missandei sat by a small fire and wrote a list of names of children she had learned in White Harbor, as if preserving a map she might need later to return to a world with schools and laughter. Grey Worm cleaned his spear with a piece of cloth that had once been a shirt. Tyrion rolled his cup in his hands and did not drink and smiled at himself for how very much he wanted to. Somewhere far south, in a room that did not admit drafts, Cersei Lannister ran a finger along the rim of a wine cup and listened to a man with a pleasant voice tell her that the North had learned a new song. She smiled and asked him to sing it again and made a small change to the words when she repeated them. She sent ravens to a handful of places where ears are cheaply bought and instructed the men who took the parts of letters that are not written to leave them where certain people like to sleep, certain doors like to be left ajar, certain servants like to put their heads together and talk about nobles' business. She told Qyburn to make a list of all the things that might wound a dragon. He told her he had already done so. She told him to add one word to the top: hunger. When morning came, it came late and gave little. Jon woke with the sensation of having been touched by something that had no hands again and rose with a sort of relief that comes when a dread that has been sleeping is recognized and invited to sit by the fire with the others. He found Daenerys standing just outside the circle of heat, her breath making its own little fog. She did not look at him when he stopped beside her, but her sleeve brushed his and he knew the weight of that small contact for the gift it was. "We will not agree on everything," she said, and the corner of her mouth tilted as if she had found, in this admission, something like a joke. "We will not agree on most things. We will keep saying the truth until we can no longer speak, and then we will have it written down for us by our friends with better hands. We will not let them pull us apart." He nodded once. The world felt like a blade laid on a whetstone and drawn back with the proper pressure. "We won't," he said. "Good," she said. She turned her face to the wind as if petitioning a god. "Then let him see 2 shapes," she added low, and her voice had in it the music of a woman who has decided her name in a place that would have named her otherwise. They broke camp and moved, and the day took them a little nearer to the place where winter had gathered all its people. Men did the work of being alive. Women did the work of being alive. Children were taught when to speak and when to close their mouths on fear. The dragons learned the smell of the north the way they learned the smell of a new horse. The old vows remembered their words in Jon's chest and did not argue with the newer ones. The road bent and straightened. The light did what it could with what it had. At noon, Bran Stark in Winterfell left his body in a chair and went into a murder of crows that had taken up residence in the bare crown of an oak on the lower slope of a hill. The birds rose as one thought rising, and he moved with them, and the land under them arranged itself in a long white sentence with a question at the end. He saw a line of dead men moving like a crack through a piece of ice. He saw eyes that did not have the grace to blink. He saw, like a flame seen from underwater, the outline of a man who was not a man, crowned by a winter that did not melt, turn his head as if at a thought, and look toward a pair of shapes moving along a road with a congregation around them. He did not like that looking. He threw the birds into a different wind and lost some of them to arrows of cold that made wings stiffen and snap. He found his way back along the few that lived and gathered himself into his hands and feet again and spoke the name of no one at all. Sansa touched the back of his hand. "He knows," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," Bran said. "He doesn't understand what he knows. That is worse. Then we will make understanding a poor weapon for him," she said. She straightened and her cloak sighed. "Send for the smith," she told a servant, and then to Arya, "Find Gendry. And to Maester Wolkan. Write Lord Manderley and tell him to bring more flint than food." She had begun to build the sort of wall that names cannot climb, and if it could not keep death out, it might keep the living from running in all directions at once when death stepped through. At sunset, the camp cut itself a place out of the cold one more time. Jon stood at the edge of it and watched the dragons settle and tried to imagine the smell of them in the gods' wood in 10 years when the sawdust from the new carpenter's work had long since settled and the story of this winter had been worn smooth by telling and retelling. He tried to imagine a child running under those trees and not being afraid, and decided to leave the work of that imagining to a version of himself that would be better at it. He turned when boots came scratching in frost behind him and watched Yora approach. "My lady cousin pounds a spear as if it were the back of a liar's head," Yora said, and his mouth took kindly to the joke even as his eyes stayed sober. "She told me she was glad I had found a way to be useful after all these years not being. She will tell you anything that seems true to her," Jon said, "and some things that only seem true because she says them this way." "Yes," Yora said, "it is a gift. I wasted mine for a game that always had coins in someone else's pocket. I see well enough now to spend it on the right table." "You think I should not have said it," Jon said, "because some nights, with the dead moving, men still want to talk about the living's mistakes. I think men like to pretend that secrets are animals we keep in cages," Yora said. "They are more like smoke. Yours would have found its way out under the door where you could not reach it. You chose to open a window instead. It makes you cold. But we can see each other more clearly for it." Jon liked that. He wished he did not. "And her. She will bleed for it," Yora said plainly. "Not the sort of bleeding we can bandage. The sort that goes on and she smiles through it. The sort that uses up a person from the core outward if it is not noticed. So notice it. She will not ask." "I know," Jon said. Yora nodded as if Jon had passed an examination. He had not known he'd been sitting, and then went away toward the glow where the queen had made a circle of light in which to endure supper. The night after that, the wind raised a voice that found the edges of tents and worried them. The stars showed briefly and then took themselves behind a veil. Jon made a round with Davos and listened to the talk of sentries and found it heartening for being about small things that were not small. What boots do to feet, the value of a good glove, the politics of sharing a flask with a man you do not trust entirely but who knows a story about your father that you want to hear. He felt the name under his ribs quiet itself until it was only a pulse. In the morning they would move again. They would move until movement became a posture. They would meet the thing that had learned to look for them. They would put down one foot and then the other and carry with them all the names they had and all the ones other people tried to hang on them. The road went on, making itself as they walked. The cold went on, honest as a rule that does not change even when no one is there to enforce it. Somewhere behind them, in a city where wine was a sacrament to a different pantheon, a woman built a plan out of envy and fear and timing. Somewhere ahead, in a place no map could promise, a man that was not a man stood in a dark that was not night and listened to the sound of two names woven into one breath. Jon lay down with his cloak over his shoulders and his sword near his hand, and the formless sense inside him of races and throws and cards he had never wanted to play. He turned his face toward the corner of the tent where the wind made itself into a voice that said nothing, and he shut his eyes, and when he slept he dreamed nothing at all, which is sometimes the only luck a man can ask for on a night when the world is bending itself into the shape of a blade.